The following is a production of Frank D. Freitas and the Internet Museum of Holography.
Hello everyone, this is Frank D. Freitas. It's 11 o'clock on Thursday night and we're live on the World Wide Web. Hello everyone, how are you? We're going to be showing the Kennedy assassination test bullets tonight. This is a project that I'm working on, doing holograms for Jerry Robertson, who has put out a work called Denial, the truth behind the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. And we're going to see live in just a few minutes what these bullets look like. One is a pristine bullet. Looks like it has never been fired from a rifle, and it was very similar to the one that's in the National Archives that supposedly did all the damage to Kennedy and Governor John Connally. And the other bullet is a bullet that was taken and fired into the cadaver's wrist, just to show what type of damage would happen just from going through a wrist, because the other bullet, the pristine bullet, actually went through Kennedy's neck, exited his neck, continued on in the limousine to hit Governor Connally in the back, puncturing his lung, exiting the front of his chest, hitting him in the wrist, shattering all the bones in the wrist, and then passing through the wrist and embedding itself into his thigh. And after all that damage, the pristine bullet supposedly was found on Governor Connally's stretcher. It worked its way out of his thigh. And yet we see this other bullet where the only thing that it did was fired into a cadaver's wrist, and you should see the damage of that, and we're just going to see it in a few seconds here on the show. 11:10 and 11:20. Excuse me, I'm going to put these images up. Next week, we've got something interesting. If you've ever wanted to know what a hologram is exactly, tune into the live webcam next Thursday night, the 28th at 11 p.m., and I'm going to take several holograms and put them under a high-power microscope and broadcast those live images on the World Wide Web for you to see exactly on a microscopic level what makes up a holographic image. Because as you know, if you pick up a hologram and hold it in the light, you see a three-dimensional image. But if you take that hologram and just look through it, if it's not in a frame or anything, it's just like a clear piece of glass, just like the glass that's in your window of your home that you can see right through. Only when the light hits that hologram at a certain angle does the holographic image appear, and there are actually fringes, interference patterns that make up this holographic image on a microscopic scale. So we're going to take the webcam, attach it to the microscope, and during the show we're going to put several holograms under the microscope, and you'll be able to see what makes up a holographic image on the microscopic scale. I've taken a look at it already. It's fairly interesting. It's something you may want to tune in to see. Our special guest this week is Dr. John Perry from Holographics North in Burlington, Vermont. And if you've ever wondered what it would be like to create large holograms, and by large I mean 3.5 by 6 feet in size, and working on a table that's 12 feet wide by 22 feet long. In fact, this table is so big that they walk around on the table to set up the optics. They just get right on the table and walk around on it. So he's going to fill us in on what it's like to work at that end of holography on the large format holograms, and he's coming up in just a moment. I've got another guest in the studio with me right now. It's a special guest as well. It's my daughter, Faith. Faith, how are you tonight?
I'm okay. How are you doing?
Okay, we just got Faith back from college, her first year. And Faith is majoring in physics with a minor in mathematics. How did the first year go?
It was a lot of fun.
Are you telling the truth?
Yes, I am. It was fun. It was difficult, but very rewarding.
Now, what do you hope to do with a major in physics?
Well, after I finish undergraduate school, I'd like to go to graduate school to get my PhD, hopefully in astrophysics, and someday work for NASA.
You know, John Perry's an astrophysicist at the University of Vermont. Now, what did you cover this year? Did you have any optics?
Towards the end of the semester, we had a little bit, but we didn't go into detail.
Optics is pretty tough, I guess, right? Figuring out paths of light and things.
Yeah.
The mathematics behind it.
Yeah, it's harder than regular physics, well, the rest of physics.
And they'll probably pick that up next year, right?
Next spring, they're offering an optics course.
Any lasers and holograms this year?
Not this year.
I'm surprised that they don't I run laser and holography classes for students down as far as 3rd grade, believe it or not. I'm surprised that they wouldn't bring lasers and holograms into a first-year physics class if for no other reason than to show the students what cool things can be done using lasers and the physics behind holography itself. I had your physics professor in one of my classes.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
Yeah. My daughter's physics professor was a student in one of my laser and holography classes at Lehigh University back in the 80s. And she found it very, very interesting. And she pursued, well, her background's in crystals, right, or something?
Holography.
Yeah. I also want to congratulate you on your recent appointment to being the president of the Society of Physics Students at the college.
Yeah, our chapter of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I started an astronomy club this year. We went up to the roof of my dorm to look at the stars, and that was sort of through the society, but I did it on my own. I got the key from my professor. We went up there every Wednesday night to look at the stars when it was clear. It was a lot of fun.
They have a nice telescope up there?
Yeah, they have a few pretty big telescopes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, it's good to have you back home.
It's nice to be back home.
Okay, well, I always wanted to get you on the show. Thank you for being a guest on my show.
Thanks for inviting me to be a guest on your show.
Okay, let's move on. Well, why don't we start off? I'll let our listeners know that we're speaking with Dr. John Perry, who has a company. Is it still in Burlington, Vermont?
Still in Burlington. Yep.
Still in Burlington. And the company is Holographics North. And I'd say it's safe to assume to say that your company's known for large format holography.
That's definitely our specialty.
Okay.
That's right.
Would you tell us a little bit about the holographic services that you offer for your clients?
Sure. We make display holograms up to sizes 3.5 by 6 feet, which would be about 1.1 by 1.8 meters. We make white light transmission. We do some reflection work, not that big. It's mostly white light transmission work, or what we call rainbow work. A good deal of what we do these days is stereogram holography, which means we can start with essentially movie footage. So we can enlarge and reduce images. We can shoot on site. We can shoot in flood lighting instead of laser lighting. We can animate the subjects. Probably most of the listeners are familiar with stereograms. We can also work with computer models, and those can be animated, morphed. We can do full color. We don't do a lot of it, but we've done some full color. The clientele tends to be trade show, corporations doing trade show booths, museums, mostly science-related museums, technology centers. That's a very international market. And artists who have projects that are funded, and they come to us pretty much as fabricators to produce the work for them. And often they're in residence here when we do that.
Most of us could probably not even comprehend making a hologram that size. I'd say that the biggest part of the audience would work with maybe 4 by 5 inch plates in their homes and schools. I would imagine that working with film that size is a little bit like working with wallpaper, isn't it?
I wish it was that easy, although wallpaper has its own problems. Of course, we're working on film, as you said, and holding the film has its own peculiar problems. But probably the worst part, the most difficult part of large format is that although the difficulties in stabilizing all the optical elements and stabilizing the film, that the difficulty of doing that increases probably with the area of the film, I would say. So we're probably 100 times, something like that, more difficult than an 8 by 10 inch. The tolerances that we're allowed are just the same.
Yeah.
We still have to be stable to roughly 1/1,000,000 of an inch. So it is extremely difficult. It's taken many years. Really, it took about a decade to really feel comfortable with the processes that we use to be able to do that. And our location is critical. Burlington, Vermont is not only a great place to live, but it's quiet. There's no train system coming in. The airport's over the hill from us, and it's a pretty low vibration area that we're in, and we're in an old brick school building, pretty solid one, in a residential area of town. And we're in the basement, of course, with nice 11-foot ceilings. It's a really great basement. And the foundation of this building is 3 feet of solid stone with about 2 feet of brick above it. So it's a great location.
If I remember correctly from a story I read about your company, maybe in Holosphere back in the 80s, I would think, you actually work on a floor instead of a table, right? The floor itself is isolated from vibration. Did you pour like a large concrete floor or something?
That's right. We call it a table, but we step right onto it. I mean, it's at floor level. Frankly, our landlord at the time insisted on this. He wouldn't let us pour a concrete slab 3 feet above the floor. It's 12 by 22 feet, and it's 14 inches thick. That's a lot of concrete. And one of the advantages to floor level is, of course, you can just step right on it and walk around. You don't have to climb up and climb down. We have more headroom over it, of course, by doing that also. But another advantage, more practically, is that someday if somebody puts that room to other uses, all they have to do is tile the table, basically, and it's a floor again. The concrete has reinforcement in it. It's not steel. It's fiberglass reinforcement. We basically dug a huge hole in the ground and filled it up with snow, which we have plenty of here, and then poured the concrete on top of the snow, and with a little blue board in between to keep the heat of the curing from melting the snow too fast.
Wow. And
then by the time the snow was melting out, the concrete had set enough to support itself. There are 4 legs that hold the whole thing up, and a fairly complicated structure actually underneath that kind of supports all that concrete. And that all sits on piers that go down through sleeves, 15-inch diameter sleeves. They go down about 14 feet, and then they're anchored directly into the glacial till is really what it is, deep under the building. So we don't float. The table is not pneumatically suspended, but it's isolated from building vibrations. We pick up ground vibrations, but not building vibrations. Again, it's a quiet neighborhood. So.
Now, I can imagine when you have enough distance, you can spread a laser beam out to cover that area of the plate. But do you use collimation also?
Well, yes and no. Our reference beams on transfers and also on shooting masters are not collimated. They're spreading over lengths of 20 to 35 feet, depending on just what we're doing. So it's a pretty good long throw. Of course, that's what counts as far as how close you are to collimation is the distance from the point source, basically from the spatial filter. So that's pretty good. When we're illuminating masters, we do have a one-dimensional collimator. We have a curved mirror, a stripped mirror about 60 inches long and curved in that long dimension. It's curved to about a 13.5-foot radius. Let me correct that. It's a 13.5-foot focal length that the curve is. So we can, when we illuminate masters, we can produce an exact conjugate of the reference beam with which the master was shot. So we don't get any distortion in the projected image from the master, and that's really the important part. The reference on the transfers is not collimated, and of course the illumination beam later is also not collimated and cannot copy that, but that's not as critical since the image is image plane at that point.
What are some of your latest projects that you've worked on?
Well, we just put 6 holograms onto the Grand Princess, which, if you're not familiar, is the biggest cruise ship in the world. I think it's 2.2 times the size of the Titanic in volume. It was being built in northern Italy. I was over there about a month ago to just check on the lighting specs, and those holograms are installed. The ship is sailing, but not in commercial service yet. It'll be another couple of weeks. And I'm getting good feedback. I'm getting feedback that they are a great attraction. They're in the casino.
What were the content?
Mostly underwater scenery. 2 of them are computer-generated. One was dolphins, sort of a mama and a baby dolphin diving down through the water and then arcing back up again as you walk by the hologram. And a lot of flora and fauna, starfish and lots of little fish of all kinds sort of floating around and doing their thing. A lot of seahorses in that one, little tails wiggling and stuff. It's a great image. It's in 2 colors. It's 6 feet wide.
Wow.
And about 3.5 feet tall. Yeah, it's our maximum size, 3.5 by 6. And lots of animation, which is why the lighting was a concern, to be sure we had a good long light path. The other big one, the other 3.5 by 6 foot hologram, there are 2 of those, is stingrays, kind of a flock of them, shall we say, flying or floating or swimming out toward you as you walk by. And then there's a lot of fan coral and fish, and there's a big shark in the background kind of filling up the middle of the frame, so there's a lot going on in there. And the third one was not a stereogram. It's a shall we say, a traditional hologram of a turtle. We have a great stuffed turtle here. Big sea turtle, about 3 feet long, and it's a 2-channel, so he moves as you walk by, but in one sudden jump, and a lot of flora and fauna in that one too. Mm-hmm. So they're great. They're just wonderful images. We're very pleased with them.
So use that holographic table just about the same way that someone would set something up in a theater at that size.
Pretty much. It's a lot of fun.
It really is. Set.
I have to walk, 10 or 15 feet just to get from one side of the subject to the other sometimes.
Has the AGFA situation had an impact on what you're doing yet?
Well, it's had an impact on my banker, I guess. I've stockpiled about a 5-year supply of a large roll film. And we have that. I mean, it was delivered last fall. It seems to be pretty good quality. And I've got it pretty well wrapped up and in a dehumidified environment. So that'll last us hopefully until something else comes along. I think Slavish, it looks pretty good. It's slow film, the new film made in Lithuania. Appears to be a pretty good substitute, except it's going to take a lot more energy unless they can do something about that.
What are you using, like a 5 or 20 watt argon?
No. This may surprise you. We use a 50 milliwatt helium neon.
Oh, really? Like one of the 125s?
We have 3 125s. That's exactly what we have. 2 of them have etalons retrofitted into them for increased coherence. And, of course, we get lots of coherence, about 15 meters, so we can shoot deep subjects. And, we measure our path lengths, but we get them within 3 or 4 feet, and don't worry about it. And those, we just kind of count our photons one at a time. I mean, we save them very carefully and try not to waste light. And we've got some pretty fast developer processes that we use. And, we get by pretty well. Our exposure times tend to run about 20 to 40 seconds, sort of in that range. Sometimes even less, even on the big shots. We get very bright masters. We get real screaming bright masters.
Those 125s, I think, when they're retrofitted and reworked now, they put out about 100 or so milliwatts, don't they?
That's right. Yeah, with the etalon tuned properly, we generally get 70 or 80 or even 90 when the tube is fresh. Yeah. Somewhere in that range. Yeah, they're great lasers. I mean, you just turn them on and they go. It's just wonderful.
That's a lot of AGFA film to have in there. I bet you could probably take one of those shoots and cut it up into a 4 by 5 inch pieces and make a fortune. These people would pay top price for that right now, I would imagine.
Yeah, not part of my corporate charter. It's not really what I'm interested in doing. Yeah, but that's true. It is a lot of film, and several artists have bought film and had it sent here for us to keep in storage for them.
Now, you have a few lab people that work with you, or do you work pretty much alone?
Well, I have one. There are really just 2 of us here. That number goes up and down a bit. Last summer it was 4, but it's been 2 this winter, and I think really that reflects the streamlining of our processes. I used to have 9 employees. That was the max about maybe 6-7 years ago. And all the people that have passed through here or working here have just done a great job in helping me streamline all these systems so that basically it can be done by one person. Now, I didn't let them go because of that. It's the old lay yourself off routine. But they all really headed on to different pastures for employment on their own pretty much. And that was a good way to do it. But so, for instance, the stereogram camera that makes masters from film footage, it's run by a small desktop computer.
Oh, I see.
It's pretty automatic. I just sit down and program it in, and it goes. And I know the optics really well. I know the hardware and the optics, and I feel very comfortable with that. If I have to fix it or change it, modify it, the software I do not. And the fellow who wrote it is still in town. I see him a lot. So.
Is your background in astrophysics, or am I?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still teach astronomy, a very no-math sort of introductory course at the university here, University of Vermont.
Now, we get a lot of kids that listen to this show, too, because they love holograms, especially when you get around 8th grade or so. And believe it or not, a lot of them would probably like to grow up and do exactly what it is that you're doing. What would you have to say to them? Would you advise them to, look into that, or maybe not? How do you feel about the industry itself of holography, and where you think it's going to be maybe in about 10 years or so? Do you think it's going to be a viable industry that's going to need people
I think that
working?
there will be components of it that will continue to grow and be viable in 10 years, and probably bigger than they are now.
Mm-hmm.
And in particular, those would be the packaging and counterfeiting or anti-counterfeiting areas that I think are still growing, and interferometry, measurement, quality control, testing with holography is a very, very valuable technique. It's just enormously valuable. And there are lots and lots of spin-off technologies and improvements to those basic methods that were there 10 or 20 years ago. Display holography, I would say fine art. I think the applications are pretty much limitless. I think it really can have a great future as an art medium.
Mm-hmm.
But for commercial display, which is pretty much what we do, it's a lot of what we do, I do think the market is dwindling. I think it went, frankly, I'm being very blunt here, I think it went quite a while on a novelty appeal.
Mm-hmm.
And it still is a very valuable medium in its own right, but it has to be used properly to make use of that value. And I think a lot of commercial artists, let's say, or designers don't see that value. It's our job to try to show them, and it's difficult to do that. It's not cheap. I mean, it's a labor-intensive undertaking, and it's not like having a Kodachrome slide, duped.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little about your website.
Well, it was updated a little over a year ago, I think. My son did it, actually. He's a computer science student in college right now. And my instructions to him were to keep it looking snappy and businesslike. I didn't want any kind of phony baloney stuff, but I wanted it to look interesting and have a lot of information on it. So I think it was exactly what I was looking for. It's at www.holonorth, HOLONORTH.com.
Okay.
And there's a list of clients on there, a list of museums also collected our work.
Some examples of your work as well, right?
Yeah, we have a stock image list. We do have a shelf stock of about 25, I think, different images right now, and there are little black and white pictures of those together with descriptions. That's on that website.
And considering the size, the price is unbelievable.
Well,
for the size of the hologram.
We hear it both ways.
Mm-hmm.
Some people expect them to be $15, and other people expect them to be $150,000.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. There's a lot of miscommunication, or let's say misunderstanding about holography out there. A lot of people just don't know what it is, or they think it's something else, really, borrowed from Star Wars, maybe.
Why do you think that is? I mean, you and I met, I don't know if you remember, in New York. I helped you hang one of your shows.
I remember well, yeah.
And, I mean, we've been in this for a long time. Why are we still at the same point we were then? I don't see where we've moved anywhere.
Well, in the education of the general public.
Yeah.
I think two things I can point to. One, it is hard to understand. I think it's difficult to really get a handle on how it works. And there are various ways to approach that answer, or to answer that question, and all of them are kind of hard to follow. And the other is that a lot of misinformation is being pumped out all the time, mostly in Hollywood, I'd say, in movies and TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff is being put up all the time that is called holography, and it isn't. It isn't even close. And that confuses people, and I don't blame them. I think it's very confusing, but the kind of basically the junk that's being put up and called holography. Holography has a lot of advantages over some of that stuff that's being shown in movies. And, of course, it also has some disadvantages, and we suffer from those.
We have a show coming into a center that I'm involved with. We opened a science and technology center here in the Lehigh Valley through Lehigh University. The Discovery Center of Science and Technology. We have a traveling exhibit from Pacific Science Center, which is coming in for this summer, called Lasers and Holograms, and you have several holograms in there. Could you tell us a little bit about what the public can expect to see?
I'll
if you can remember what they are.
It was a while ago that show was put together, and so it's some time since we gave them those holograms, but as I recall, there are maybe 4 or 5 white light transmissions, something along those lines, and I think that our T-Rex skull is pretty definitely one of those, a big dinosaur skull, life size, and that's a great piece. It's gotten a lot.
The manual that was sent out for the exhibit, they have the one where the person, I think it's called Burst, where the person's blowing a large balloon or something,
balloon
a bubble.
Blow Up is the name of that piece, and yep, it's a woman sort of holding a balloon in front of her face, blowing it up, and she's got her two hands on the balloon, and her fingers are kind of spread out, and then it's a two-channel hologram. When you step to the right, you see the balloon having disappeared, and you see her face, and her hands are still there, and she's still in the motions kind of blowing up this balloon, but the balloon is gone. And you see both images together. They're superimposed on each other.
Oh, I see.
So you see the balloon, but you also see her behind it. And then the first image disappears.
Is that a pulsed hologram?
No, yes, it's pulsed.
Yeah.
Pulsed that in Toronto with Michael Sowden.
Okay.
His research back about 8 or 9 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
It's a nice piece. It's a great piece.
I think the other one is maybe the Space Telescope, and I'm just pulling this out of memory here because I don't have the book with me.
Yeah, it could be the Hubble Space Telescope.
Yeah.
We have a hologram of that, and we have a hologram of the Freedom Space Station, the U.S. space station, which never got launched, at least not yet. And if it does, it won't look like what it looked like back then, the design. And we have both of those images in one hologram as a two-channel hologram. That might be what they have, I think.
I see. Well, John, I want to thank you very much for being on the show. And is there anything you want to let the listeners know before you head out?
Probably not. Just check out our website. I think you'll find it entertaining. And, if you have any other information you need or interest, give us a call. Okay.
And we have a link to Holographics North website right on the HoloTalk page. So you just click on that link and off you go.
Great. Thanks, Frank.
John, thank you very much for being a guest on HoloTalk.
Bye.
Take care.